Happy Tuesday. I'm Anna Hall. I'm the CEO of the Northeast Charter Schools Network, and I am your temporary host, standing in for Yomika, who will be joining us later in the hour. We are going to mix it up a little bit today in terms of format and start with general updates from the association, from each of the authorizers, field some questions we've received in advance, and use the Q&A for questions. And then Yomika is going to join us and do a deep dive into the governor's executive budget. Many of you probably received an email summary that she sent out earlier today, very comprehensive. And I know that the Charter Center has also been hosting forums and sharing information. Yomika actually was just recently talking with folks in Albany, and so has some additional weedy insights that might be relevant to share. So we're going to try to segment the topics a little bit in that way, where we do sort of typical content first and then budget stuff at the back half. So please bear with us as we kick it off. So thank you, as always, to our fine fellow friends here, David Frank, Executive Director of the Charter Schools Office at SED, Susie Carello, Executive Director of the SUNY Charter Schools Institute, Erin Cochran, Managing Director, Policy and Operations at New York City DOE, Lori Hazley, Senior Director of Charter Authorizing and Accountability at New York City DOE, and Corey Callahan, General Counsel and VP of Legal Policy at the New York City Charter Center. So we have a couple of non-budget related updates, and then would love to hear David, Susie, and Lori from you all, and then we'll go to questions. So please, first join us and Achievement First this coming Thursday evening for a forum called Public Health in Our Communities, What You Need to Know About the COVID-19 Vaccine. We encourage you to share information about this forum with parents in your school community. In fact, we've had some school communities say that they're interested in having their teachers participate in order to help encourage future participation in the vaccine effort with families. So the purpose of the webinar is to provide families access to accurate public health information on COVID-19 and the vaccine. It will feature some elected officials and health professionals to provide expert information about the vaccine in hopes that as many people as possible feel comfortable planning to be vaccinated. So we're dropping a link in the chat with more information about how to attend. If you want communication material to share with your school community, please feel free to reach us and let us know. We have flyers in both English and Spanish that you can share. And then I am always at the risk of stealing David's thunder, but if you didn't already see the email from David and SED, the CSP application for $150 per student for a maximum of $49,950 per EdCorp has been released, and those applications are due February 15th. So as a reminder, this is different than the 2 rounds of CARES Act funding, one of which was already, the application was already out and due, the second of which the application has not yet been released. And this funding is available to all charters in the state. So we strongly encourage every school to apply, and I'm sure David would be happy today to field any questions. I would also note, though, that this is also different from another CSP application that we know some of you are working on, which is a competitive grant for new and expanding schools, for which you should not direct questions to David. Not that he is not a lovely person and doesn't want to help you, but the nature of that grant, the competitive nature of that grant, means that only certain people at SED are even allowed to speak to any potential applicant, and none of those people are David. So if you have any questions about, if you have any questions about that funding or the difference in the process between the 2 grants, please feel free to let us know. We're happy to get you as much information as we possibly can through, or point you to the totally appropriate channels. So David, I hope I didn't just speak too much for you right then. So how about you kick us off with any updates in case you want to start off by correcting me or adding any additional context I may have missed.
Sure, thanks, Anna. I hope everyone is well. I had 3 things I wanted to share today. One is that we did put out our new school RFP in draft form for public comment. And so this is the application for people who are looking to create new Board of Regents authorized charter schools. So if you're interested in looking at the RFP, or putting in public comment, you can do so, and I shared the link in the chat. I'm really happy with some of the additions we made, particularly around community-centered authorizing and our shared, and by shared I mean everyone on this call, our shared commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. The second thing I wanted to mention is the SED, the two proposed federal waivers that we put out for public comment. One is on state assessments, and it's a proposed waiver asking the U.S. Department of Education to allow SED to not administer all state exams, the Regents exam, the 3 through 8 assessments, the science exams in grades 4 and 8, as well as the NYSESLAT. The second one is regarding ESSA accountability, not your authorizers accountability, but ESSA accountability, and changing the methodology for that. I do want to give you just a disclaimer. These are not final decisions. This is requesting public comment on a potential request to do these things. So ultimately, the United States Department of Education would have to make a determination to approve these or not. And SED hasn't even sent in the waivers yet. We're just looking for comment. So I hope that you will give some comment if you so choose. Comments will be accepted through February 5th, and all of the instructions on how to comment can be found, and the documents, the proposed waivers, can be found on the SED website at that link. And then last but not least, as Anna mentioned, we do have almost $10 million, a little over $10.3 million that we're putting out to the field to help support your response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And it is $150 per student, up to $49,950. There actually is a method to the madness as to why it's that number, bureaucratic reasons. But so far we have 73 applications in progress, only one submitted. If please don't leave this money on the table. Generally, it's a pretty easy process to apply. I do want to remind everyone to hit submit once you've finished. I know it kind of goes without saying, but sometimes it's easy to miss that submit button. So applications for that pot of money are due on the 15th of February. And so I urge you to put in your application. Every education corporation can apply. And that's all I have.
Yeah, and before I hand it over to Susie, I'll just say the link that we have been putting in the chat for the CSC application, folks have raised that it's not working, and so we will work on the back end to get that out. So with that having been said, Susie, updates from you all?
Gosh, I haven't done that in a while. Hi, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Really great to see all of you. We'll have, I guess this is the friendly competition. This is the friendly competition that authorizers in states with great charter sectors are supposed to have. So as many, the SUNY RFP has been up for a while, but February 16th is the due date for the first round. So I wanted to make sure that anybody who is interested in applying for a SUNY charter has that information. I put that link in the chat. We've been also hearing from schools and want to encourage more of you, if you're thinking about changing what your school year is going to look like this year. We've been kind of saying this, gosh, I was reminded today, for 11 months, which seems a little stunning. but was reminded today that we are getting some questions about end of school year, number of hours required, et cetera. If you're thinking about making any changes to your calendar or schedule, please do reach out to the Institute so that we can kind of help you navigate what all of those pieces and parts will be. And that's all I've got.
Great, thanks. Lori, any updates?
Hi all, good afternoon. I don't have any updates today.
Great, thanks. My browser is loading what, David, I believe was the link from your memo. So I'll put this out for everyone in case anyone else's browser can go faster than mine. And David, if that is not working, then that is the link from the memo, and we might need you to
it works for me.
give the right link. Okay, well, yeah, I blame, oh, now it's working. All right, I blame the internet for so many things in my life all of these days. Great, so everyone can rely on that link. All right, so we'll do a couple of questions from the Q&A and then hand it over to Corey and Aaron, and Yumika should be joining us shortly. So a lot of questions about the funding. And so David, can you discuss the exclusions from the CSP grant for year one charters and those receiving startup funding, which I think, so Kate asked that and Stacy had asked an earlier question that I clarified. So I think that they're asking the same question. New schools are not eligible for this funding?
If you're currently receiving CSP funds for new school startups, you're not eligible for these funds, correct?
One CSP award at a time kind of rule. Same old, same old. Gotcha. And then, so is the competitive, and if you cannot answer this question, I will get this answer and I will get it from someone else, or I will get it from someone else at SED, having just said not to ask you about the competitive grant. Is it open yet?
It is not open yet, and SED staff are working very hard to get it released, but there are a lot of steps involved. And so if you do have any questions, I would say reach out. Anna said exactly the right thing. Reach out to Anna and her team, and they can help you navigate that. But we are working very hard to get that grant out. The good news is that the money is there. It's not going anywhere. We just have to get the RFP out.
Totally. And I'll say too, I'm happy to be in touch with the folks in the grants office and see if they would appreciate a forum. If that's something that they're able to offer, we can work with them to put it together. So then also on the CSP funding, is the funding per school or just one allocation for the Ed Corp? And it's just one allocation for the Ed Corp. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Great. Stacy, and I only chuckle because Stacy always has great questions, and I feel like I'm part of a dialogue between her and others when I field them. If you spent your CSP because you had to, you'd be eligible, right? It's just you can't be drawing on two pots of CSP money at the same time.
I will give you a very bureaucratic answer. If you do not currently have a CSP grant that you're spending down on, and you meet the other criteria set forth in the application, then yes, you would be eligible. Great.
If folks have other follow-up questions on that, you can feel free to reach out to us and we can help you puzzle it out. I'm not sure to whom the best person is to direct this. Is there further guidance available on the 2801A incorporating public health emergencies into district safety plans? I was not aware. Jen, why don't we follow up offline, because I was not aware that that was a requirement that anyone was anticipating in the near future, unless anyone, Susie, David, Corey, Aaron, Lori, has more insight into that. No, all right, I'm seeing head shakes. And so I think last CSP question that David, you can probably see two questions on the same topic. If one school in the Ed Corp is receiving startup CSP funding, is the Ed Corp still eligible?
Yes, they would be.
David, when will schools know if the federal government waivers is? I don't know if folks could see Susie. She's also intrigued by this question and the answer. When will SCD know if its waiver has been granted by the federal government?
You would have to ask Secretary nominee Miguel Cardona of that question.
There was a lovely gentleman, and I'm sure this is high on his priority list. All right, with that, I will turn it over, Corey, to you and Aaron, and then I think Yomiko will be joining us shortly.
Great, thanks so much, Anna. So I will just start with, we have for the schools in the city, we have a call on Friday with the New York City DOE and Department of Health. If you haven't already registered for that or have health questions, please feel free to submit them to DOE or myself. I'll drop the link in the chat, and then I will turn it over to Erin. Hi, Erin, to see if you have any announcements for anyone.
Hi, Corey. Good afternoon, everyone. The only announcement is a plug to please carefully review the Charter School Weekly. We have been running some very important instructions for charter schools that may not yet be open for in-person instruction that are planning to do so. So there's some important instructions there for folks that plan to use busing when you return to campuses if you are not already physically in schools. And that is the only thing I have.
And it looks like, shockingly, we have no questions in the Q&A. So I guess everyone has all the info they possibly need from the NYC DOE. Erin, take this down.
I know, I'm writing down that all of the questions are answered. I like it.
Great. Well, I will begin to kick off the budget summary, and I apologize that I'm awkwardly looking out the front window of my house because my kids arrived home on a school bus probably 15 minutes ago, and now there's another school bus parked in front of my house. And so I'm wondering if, in fact, all of my kids got off the first school bus, or if maybe, as is often the case, they all got off the school bus, but their backpacks, for example, did not. The mystery will have to wait until after we dive into some of this executive budget update. So I'm sure I'm not saying something that is news to many of you, but just a reminder, this is the governor's executive budget is the first step in a process. And so while there's a lot of information that's out there, and that's information that we are all desperate to have, it is not at the level of detail that anyone should be using to write a budget or really be counting on as being signed, sealed, and delivered, because the negotiation and the legislative process that will go from here until the beginning of April has the potential to change things a fair amount. So with that said, let me give you the general lay of the land, and please use the Q&A for any questions, and you don't have to wait to the end to load them up. But the Q&A is a lot easier for us to navigate than questions in the chat. So the total state budget is almost $193 billion, which is, I think, useful to know in terms of scale for when we talk about some of the other sort of numbers and inputs. That budget assumes $6 billion in federal aid from the federal government, which has not yet been approved. And also important to know that the federal negotiations around additional aid are targeting a deadline of mid-March, which just means that the degree of uncertainty that will remain about exactly what the parameters are that are possible for the New York State budget are going to go on longer than any of us, I think, would prefer. And so the executive budget assumes $3 billion in each of the next 2 fiscal years, so $6 billion in total, but not all for the current year. Now, the governor has requested $15 billion in federal funding. So this is the number that he has really anchored on. And if New York receives $15 billion, some of the many potential cuts that are anticipated in the current budget will not happen. And in fact, there's the potential under that scenario that education aid would actually be increased. So we are dusting off the effort that we launched last spring in partnership with the Charter Center Fund New York Schools, so www.fundnewyorkschools.org. The advocacy effort, when we launched it last spring, gathered thousands of letters from charter supporters to federal elected officials, and it was noticed. So we've heard that those efforts didn't go unnoticed, and it's important to weigh in now as well, given that the $15 billion number is so specific and would, we are very clear that that would be directly tied to the presence or absence of cuts to education funding. So in the current budget, so this is the budget that assumes $6 billion, not $15 billion, school aid actually increases by about $2 billion. But while the overall amount of funding increases, the state funding actually decreases by about $600 million. So the executive budget moves around a bunch of different categories of aid and creates a local district funding adjustment of over $1 billion. And folks who were playing along at home last year in the budget season will recognize this as similar to the pandemic adjustment that was applied to districts but not to charters, which was exactly commensurate with what districts expected to receive in the CARES Act funding. So this is really, while it amounts to $2 billion more in education funding compared to this year, the actual amount that the state is spending on education decreases and is offset by both the federal funding that has already been committed in the CARES Act funding, as well as this anticipated $6 billion, which really is just an assumption that the governor and his team have made in order to balance the budget, as opposed to it is based on some piece of legislation that has already been passed along the lines of the prior two rounds of federal funding. So the charter tuition formula for the 21-22 school year is reduced to reflect the reduction in school aid to districts. So this is sort of fair cuts all around, if you will, similar cuts to both district and charter schools. So generally speaking, charter tuition would be on par with this year because the changes to the formula actually introduce factors that we don't yet have. They're numbers that are created by the state. We actually can't run the specific formula today. The total estimated reduction is around $75 million, but that would be not reflected in future future year formula calculations. And then that reduction is in proportion to the tuition paid for charter school students. So this is when a charter student goes to a district school, when a district student goes to a charter school, the district receives a transition aid amount, and the state is actually reducing the amount of that aid to districts. Now, while that actually has nothing to do with the amount of charter funding that your schools receive, it will very likely be not a popular proposal with our district friends. So other funding cuts to balance the budget include things like library aid, teacher diversity pipeline funding. So there are other, I hesitate to call them ancillary reductions, but reductions to related supports and programs that might be important to folks. Aside from the funding pieces of the executive budget proposal, there are two other charter pieces that are of particular interest to folks, and folks may have heard of. So first is a provision to allow charters that were revoked, terminated, surrendered, or not renewed after July 1st of 2015 to be reissued. So colloquially, these are often referred to as zombie charters, and that these reissued charters wouldn't count against the cap. So this would allow something on the order of 20 additional schools to be opened in New York City if it is approved. It's important to note that this exact same language was in last year's governor's budget proposal and ultimately was not approved. So it is something that obviously we and the Charter Center and others will be watching carefully and working on, but is a good example of something that might be in the governor's proposal and doesn't necessarily mean that it's signed, sealed, and delivered. And then the last big category is that reimbursement to the city of New York for charter facility rental assistance would be eliminated. So this isn't saying necessarily that rental assistance would be eliminated. It's that the reimbursement that the state gives to the city currently under statute for any expenditures that the state has above and beyond, that the city has above and beyond a certain amount, the state will no longer pass along. So similarly, something that's likely to receive lots of attention, and again, we and the Charter Center and other folks are paying close attention to this and getting ready to work on it diligently. So I'm going to pause there. We don't yet have Yomika. So there are a couple of other.
I'm adding Yomika right now.
Oh, great. Well, then I will hit the last couple of headlines, and folks should ask Yomika lots of questions because she has been deep in the weeds on this with the Department of Budget and other folks, and can answer questions probably well better than I can. So a couple of other. Oh, hey, Yomika, I'm just hitting the last. All right, great. Do you want me to hit the last couple things? I'm at the dormitory authority note.
Sure.
Great. Well, this is. I'm glad you're on, because I think there's an item in the budget that would authorize the dormitory authority of the state to offer design, construction, and loan services to nonprofits. And so it's possible that this proposal could offer project cost savings or other supports. So if you have construction projects planned or will soon and want to know more about the provision and if it might apply to your project, you should let Yomika know. And now I can say that because she's on here, and I'm not just saying it about her. And then similarly to some things that we've been discussing with folks around vaccines, is that the governor's budget would mandate that employees be provided up to 4 hours of paid time off in order to receive the COVID vaccines, unless they're offered at the workplace, in which it doesn't have to be as much as 4 hours, and that's for each dose. Yomika, do you want me to pass it over to you? And because I have not been watching if there are questions in the Q&A. Are you there? All right, I can keep going.
I'm here. I'm happy to answer questions. I see there's one question only in the Q&A. I know that it's 4:30, so if we need to move on to another section, either way. So.
No, we actually hit the other content first, and Corey noted the momentous occasion that there were not questions about New York City topics, and so I have not talked about potential mobile sports betting, adult use cannabis. So if people are particularly interested in either of those topics, we can definitely discuss them as well, and no judgment here. But I think we hit the majority of the education notes, with the exception, I apologize, that the joint budget hearing on elementary education, which is actually P12 education, so it includes charter schools, is Thursday at 9:30. And so if you want to submit testimony to the legislature, you can do that, and we'll put the link in the chat. Yomika, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, so I'm looking at the Q&A, and I see one here from Stacy. How would this rental assistance decision impact schools receiving rental assistance already, or would it only impact the city and not getting reimbursed? The proposal as it is written would eliminate the reimbursement to the city of New York for their payments to charter. So it's an elimination of reimbursement to the city, not specifically or directly to charters. So I hope that answers that question. There's another one here from Allison. Sorry, late question this one's for New York City DOE. And then there's another one. So the angle right now is give New York State the full $15 billion because it's lower. if it's the lower $6 billion education funding is cut. Is that correct? Yes. So let me just unpack that a little bit. So $15 billion will give funding above what's available right, or what's allocated in the executive budget right now, right? So $6 billion is assumed to be received. If we receive that, you will receive the funding as Anna laid out in the opening for the budget. $15 billion will give us funding above that. So if that makes it clear. So, but, and I'm going to complicate this, and I apologize. That $6 billion does include that $607 million cut to the state share of funding. But dollars for dollars, what you should see is equal funding. You should see, you won't experience any cut in terms of all funds at $6 billion. The point is that we do need to get the $6 billion. If we do not receive that $6 billion, there will be cuts. And similar to what's the provisions that are in the enacted budget or the current budget, the Division of Budget would have the authority after August 31st, 2021 to make cuts across the board to bring the budget in line with actual revenue. So we need that federal aid. We need the $6 billion. We need the $15 billion because we would always love to do more, avoid those cuts to state share funding, and be able to sort of do what we need to do to recover. All right, that looks like that's it.
Yumika, yeah, there's one other question from Bruce saying, I understand that it's extremely early in the budget process, but is there any concern that the governor's proposal to eliminate funding the reimbursement for rental assistance could lead the city to revisit their previous denials of co-location with a view of forcing co-locations of schools that are already in independent private facilities?
I won't speak for New York City DOE. I can say, sort of what's in the budget, and all of this is subject to negotiation down, at the budget table down the road. But so I couldn't speak to what, what or how New York City DOE. Folks are here from New York City DOE. They may be better positioned to answer that question.
The one thing at the state level that we've discussed, and I don't know, Yumika, if you want to say more about this, is that the topic of co-location is not necessarily a particularly popular one. And so the downstream implications of a policy that might produce more co-locations might have other political implications aside from the dollars associated with either policy.
Right. No secret here that the encouraging co-location is not something that the legislature has would ever foreseeably be comfortable with. So that's going to be, like I said, a serious subject of negotiation in the legislature. Yeah, absolutely. Stacey,
I agree with you as always. Yeah, it would cause a legal mess to unwind leases, legitimate leases that schools are engaged in. So we'll continue to watch this carefully, and we'll be calling on all of you to engage in advocacy activities over the course of the session. But starting off, join us on Thursday evening and make sure that your school communities are aware. I think the more that we can all do collectively to share accurate and actionable information about the vaccine so that people receive it when they're eligible is definitely a path towards a more normal 21-22 school year.
Right. I just want to put a plug in. As you can see, I am doing a plug here for the New York State Charter Parent Council. Here, just giving them a plug so that if schools, please share the information with the Charter Parent Council, with your PTOs, with your parents, with your families. Encourage them to sign up for the Facebook group and really take advantage of the collective action that can do. So I'm doing a nice shout out for them today. You see their logo. That's for us to them.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Take care.